Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Citizen Exclusive with Mpoki Thompson. The beginning of 2026, we're going to talk a lot about diplomatic relations with Tanzania and foreign missions. And today, I have with me the acting ambassador of the USA to Tanzania, Andrew Lentz. Andrew Lentz has served in Tanzania for, I think, about a year now.
Year and a half.
Yeah, a year and a half in the absence of a Senate-approved ambassador. You assumed the role last year in 2025. And today we're going to talk about the relations between Tanzania and the US. A lot has been happening. So to kick it right off, first and foremost, welcome to the Citizen Exclusive.
Well, thank you so much, Mpoki. And I just want to say to you and to everyone watching and reading this, how much I really want to give big congratulations to the Citizen, to Mwananchi. It is so important for countries to have dynamic media houses like yours that are willing to hold public servants like me accountable.
Yeah.
And to do this kind of tough and good reporting. So thank you so much for all the work you're doing. It's really critical.
Indeed. So let's dig right in. There's been positive engagement between Tanzania and the US of late. We've seen posts on social media, but also media. We've been covering your visits to Dodoma, meeting with different ministers. So we are seeing that positive engagement. However, most people will be asking, the last public statement that was issued by the US Embassy regarding its relations with Tanzania talked about a review of those relations. And particularly concerns were raised around religious freedom of speech, but also concerns about what happened on October 29. Now, the question is, how far has that review progressed and what is the outlook at the moment?
Thank you, Mpoki. The events before, during, and after the October 29 elections were really shocking. The killing of civilians, the assault on free speech, the closing of churches, attacks on some religious figures. These events caused real concerns and questions in Washington whether we could have what the future of the bilateral relationship was, and whether Tanzania's historic role of being a stable country in the region that respected and protected religious freedom, whether that was still the case. So that was the questions that were being raised and the concerns that were being raised in Washington after the events of October 29. And it wasn't just around the elections, but it was also in the economic sphere, in the trade sphere, and also in questions about our assistance relationship in the past and what it could look like in the future. So for American companies kept coming to us with complaints that they were facing non-tariff regulatory tax burdens that prevented them from being able to do business in Tanzania.
Okay.
And that often they felt that there was not an even playing field as companies from competitor companies seemed to be doing quite well.
Okay.
And then over the years, the United States taxpayer has invested hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, propping up Tanzania's health, education, and other social services. So I think you put all that together, real questions about Tanzanian stability and whether it could still remain the historic, true to its historic commitment to religious freedom and stability, whether there was an opportunity for a level playing field for American companies and economic interests, and whether we could reset the assistance relationship. I think our December 6th statement that came in was a necessary intervention. It was a necessary intervention to just take a stop and say, we need a moment to review this relationship. Now, I would like to say, and as you said, you've covered my visits to Dodoma. I think you covered the opportunity I had to sit with Her Excellency, the President, that we've been engaging quite seriously with the government about these concerns, and that we're making progress across the range of issues to really address concerns on both sides. And I believe that there is a commitment on the part of the United States of America and on the part of Tanzania to reset this relationship as we continue with our review around shared principles of security, and stability.
Okay, but as it stands, the public statement, that it's still in place.
The public statement is still in place. The review remains ongoing.
Okay.
And so we continue to engage very seriously. And as I said, I feel optimistic, and I'm an optimistic person by nature. I'm an optimistic person that we are going to be able to reset this relationship, and that the relationship is going to be stronger in the future than it was before.
Okay, so the review is ongoing, and you said part of the concern was regarding investments, but we have seen some agreements between the Tanzanian government and the U.S. when it comes to trade relations. Now, as all these positive initiatives are being undertaken, it still is happening, despite the fact that that public statement about the concerns is still in place.
Well, I think, Mboki, you know, if in a strong friendship and partnership, you need truth telling. And that doesn't come at the expense of engagement and activity and a commitment to continue working together.
Okay.
I mean, I'm married with my wife. She and I are committed to working together. We're committed to living together. We're committed to having creating a wonderful future for our children. But that doesn't mean that we don't speak truth to each other. And it doesn't mean that we call problems for what they are. And I think at that moment in our bilateral relationship, it was important for us to put that statement out. It was important for us to be clear with the Tanzanian people, with our colleagues in the Tanzanian government, that there were problems. And that there were problems now, there were problems that have been, that were festering over time. And so it was important for us now to take steps to fix that and to reset it and to be able to create a new foundation, a very strong foundation on which we can build and go forward. I think we can get there.
Yeah.
So really, I want to just say, I think it's a good question, but I don't see them as mutually exclusive.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Now, let's talk about the broader assistance that the U.S. does provide to Tanzania. And I'm talking about some of the international initiatives or development support. We are seeing Western allies now prioritizing domestic development as opposed to international assistance. Even U.S. policymakers have to look at what are some of the initiatives that they need to prioritize when it comes to development. We are seeing Africa right now is not a priority for the U.S. or even for some European countries. What does that speak about the broader relations that the U.S. has had since time immemorial with Tanzania, with Africa, as this deprioritization is currently happening?
Well, I think I'm going to push back a little bit on how you framed it.
Okay.
I would disagree that the United States has deprioritized Africa or our commitment to partnership to combat HIV/AIDS, to eliminate malaria and TB, to make sure that we're working together to prevent global health security crises that can cross borders. I don't see that we have deprioritized that.
Okay.
What we have done is started a conversation with countries around Africa and around the world on is there a more effective way to do it? And I also think we are meeting Tanzania where it is. So what I hear a lot from Tanzanian people, from officials in the government, and also from the president, is that Tanzania, as a lower middle income country with an aspiration to be an upper middle income country by 2050, wants to move away from a donor-recipient relationship. Tanzania doesn't want to be waiting for handouts from the American government or any other government. I think it wants to achieve a relationship on an equal footing, a relationship of mutual benefit, a relationship of reciprocity, where our private sectors can drive growth, where we can share the kinds of expertise that I saw up at KCMC and other cutting-edge medical institutions in the north of Tanzania, and I know at Muhimbili and other places. That the expertise is here, the drive is here. What we need to do is start a new relationship where we can tap into it. So it's not a deprioritization. You do see assistance levels dropping, but I think in some ways that makes sense. That as Tanzanian wealth grows, as Tanzania's economy continues to grow at 6-7% a year, then I think it makes sense that American assistance dollars should drop and we should start changing the nature of how we work together.
Okay, now let me also just to linger a little bit longer on that particular point. You're saying that it's not a deprioritization, but you're looking at how best we can have more impact or efficiency in this relation. But that has been more pronounced under the Trump administration, and we are seeing the defunding of development projects that has impacted developing world. You're saying you're having a review for mutually beneficial setup. But why now? I mean, didn't the U.S. realize that the trend of relations was not being impactful? Since the years that you've been helping Tanzania, we've been helping Africa and all these other parts of the developing world.
Well, I mean, again, it's a wonderful question. I mean, I guess why now? I'd flip it and say, well, why not now? Yeah. There's no question that what we achieved together in the past assistance relationship was fantastic. I mean, we increased Tanzanian life expectancy over the last 2 decades by 15 years. We reduced HIV mortality rates by 80%. We got close to driving down malaria to near elimination in Zanzibar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the outcomes and the achievements of our past assistance relationship are, without question, they were wonderful. That created a foundation. But now I think we have to ask ourselves, and I think these were the important questions, was the old relationship sustainable? As the United States looks at what its population needs, and we have our own populations you can read about.
Yeah.
I mean, our own needs.
Yeah.
Our health system is straining. We've got needs to other social service needs. So we do have domestic concerns. I think, is it sustainable? And then what is the growth trajectory of Tanzania? And the growth trajectory of Tanzania is quite good. So I think it was time now, why wait, to reset the foundations of that relationship and see if we can forge something new that actually is more dynamic. And I love the word you used, outcome-based. And I think that's what we need to focus on. It's not about how many dollars we're giving to a situation. It's not about how many NGOs we fund. It's not about, those aren't the right metrics.
Yeah.
I think the metrics need to be, are we actually, building on the achievements we made and driving them down up to 100% HIV elimination? Are we getting rid of malaria? Are we strengthening the health systems here in Tanzania to such an extent that if the United States walked away completely, Tanzania was able to carry it on its own? I think that's our goal. And that's what we hope to achieve going forward.
Okay, and of course, these refinements of relations have not been immune to criticism.
Correct.
Even by African governments.
Right.
And let's speak about the health sector relations between the U.S., Tanzania, and all these other African countries. Some of them have been challenged even in courts of law because they say that some policymakers in Africa, in African governments, were not consulted when the U.S. was doing this review. What do you have to speak about that? The bilateral relations that are changing in the health sector. What do you aim to achieve?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it goes back to your last question. What we aim to achieve is a much stronger, much more dynamic health partnership with Tanzania and with these other countries. Let's focus on Tanzania. With Tanzania, that at the end of a 5-year cycle, Tanzania's health systems are so robust, so strong, so deep, with not only that are supported by the right mix of assistance, government funding, and private sector investment, that system can sustain regardless of whether the United States, Europe, China, or anybody else is coming here to support it. And then that new health system, that new robust dynamic health system, is able to partner on an equal footing with experts and institutions in the United States and anywhere else to be co-partners in combating global health security risks. That we can work together to figure out how do we more efficiently end the HIV/AIDS pandemic, that we can fight malaria in new ways and any new strains that come. So it's that kind of outcome-oriented thing. Now, we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're negotiating a memorandum of understanding for a 5-year health program with Tanzania. I hope we get there. And that, again, is part of the review, that we need to see concrete steps by the government of Tanzania that they are as eager to enter into this kind of new relationship based on shared values of security and prosperity that we are offering. Once we see that, we're going to jump into those negotiations. Now, I think it's incumbent on Tanzania, it's incumbent on the United States to negotiate as equals in good faith, to get an agreement that works for Tanzania and works for the United States of America. Now, the examples that you said in other countries, I think that should be taken as a good thing. Like
Yeah.
if the courts are playing the role that they should play, to look at an agreement, and make sure that it meets the needs of their people, I'd say we should applaud that. And that doesn't mean that it's a something that's wrong with the MOU process. I think what it means is that it matters enough for the executive branches in those countries to negotiate it and for the courts to review it to make sure it works and that it's sustainable. And I hope we can get there. I think, first of all, Mpoke, I hope that we learn from those examples. And that when we get to the negotiating table, we're kind of taking a look, well, what worked, what didn't there? How can we improve it here and make sure that it works for our two peoples?
And this pushback is also coming on the backdrop of the exit of the USAID, and which has impacted Tanzania. There's been loss of jobs, but particularly the health sector has been impacted severely. You know, the HIV and AIDS medicine that was made readily available to most Tanzanians, the community hospitals have been impacted. So as you're talking about reviewing the relations as far as health is concerned, for a mutually beneficial agreement between the two countries, and then there is a defunding of the USAID, one would really ask, to whose benefit? Because Tanzanians are feeling the pinch right now. I mean, when we talk to the Ministry of Health, when we talk to the government at large, they say that we are now capable of, sustaining our own health needs, our own health supplies. But when you talk to the people who are now the ones who need the particular treatment, they're saying the situation is not as ideal as the government makes it seem to be. So again, to whose benefit? Is it to the benefit of the U.S. government? Is it to the benefit of the Tanzanian government? Or should it be to the benefit of Tanzanians who are severely impacted?
Yeah, no, and thank you for putting the focus where it should be, which is on the people and on the health outcomes. That's really where we need to be focusing and making sure in whatever we do, are we setting ourselves on a trajectory where the health outcomes will be better and where lives will be better and stronger and healthier. So you're right, that's got to be our focus. I think one thing to make sure that you and the viewers and readers know, this was not simply an abrupt stop. Now, I know for many implementing partners, for many people at community hospitals, it probably felt that way.
No.
But we transitioned in July of last year the assistance portfolio from USAID to the Department of State. So there was a continuity of managing that assistance portfolio that remained. That came over to the Department of State, and actually the new Foreign Assistance Office moved under my responsibility at the Tanzania mission level. Then there were some programs that were started under USAID that continued, and those continue to today. We also then established what we called a bridge funding plan. So it was about $165 million or so that we continued as we move from the old system to the new. And that's running through April, May of this year. That's $165 million to keep funding commodities and frontline health workers.
Okay.
So that, again, was an effort to make sure that as we change, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping the focus on the people that you just raised, and that we could continue some continuity of service. Now, our hope is that we can get to negotiating this MOU as quickly as possible, that we can reach agreement on something that works, and that we can start this new approach as early as spring this year, and begin to really lay the foundation of something bigger and better.
Okay.
So, but thank you. I mean, I think it's important, and I want to assure everybody that we never lost focus on those outcomes or the people, the recipients of this assistance. And so that's why we put in motion these kind of transitional measures.
Okay, now still in the spirit of the U.S. reviewing its relations with the rest of the world, let's talk about the trade. Under the Trump administration, we saw a review of the trade tariffs globally. And focusing on Africa, focusing on Tanzania, we've also been impacted. 10% minimum taxes that have been imposed on goods that are coming from this part of the world. How has this, and in some countries such as South Africa, it's higher, it's I think about 30%. How has this impacted trade relations, between the US and Tanzania? Because at the moment, there is a trade deficit, the value of almost $600 million, 80% of that is in favor of the US. So how now do these tariff reviews affect trade relations?
Yeah, well, of course they're going to affect trade flows. There's no question about that. But I mean, let's go back and kind of think. Let's look at the context of where this came from and why this policy came into being. I mean, historically, the United States of America has had one of the most open economies in the world. And yet, oftentimes, when American companies and businesses and investors went overseas, they were facing tariff and non-tariff barriers in their partner that limited their access to partner markets. So while the United States was open, we were often seeing barriers overseas in our partner markets. So this lack of reciprocity was unfair, and it was a threat to American national and economic security interests.
Okay.
So a lot of what's driving America's approach to trade and our economic policy is to try and reset this again. This is a flow through all of, I think, the questions that you have, is this reset, a time to review and look at how do we reestablish relationships with our partners like Tanzania around these shared values of prosperity and security and on a basis of reciprocity, mutual benefit, and fairness. And so that's what we're trying to achieve. I really believe, and this is again, I think part of the good news story is that I've been engaging intensively with partners in the government. We've been talking about how do we really begin to tear down some of these tax, non-tariff, and regulatory barriers that are limiting the extent of the partnership between Tanzanian private sector and American private sector that can really drive our relationship going forward. How do we remove those barriers and begin to really spur growth here and in the United States? I think we're making progress. I think there is a shared commitment to try and get to that place. Now, my argument would be, if the Tanzanian government really enacts these reforms, it really takes a look at what's impeding investment into our country. What is keeping top-line American companies and investors from coming here and trading with us? I think you're going to see a growth. If they really remove that, all of a sudden the Tanzanian economy will not just grow at 6-7%, it could grow at 12, 13, 14% per year. And that actually, frankly, I think is what is needed if Tanzania wants to meet its Vision 2050 goals. You've got to have that kind of double-digit growth rate. If you get there, that can start taking care of the trade imbalance. I mean, so I think really we want to reset. We want to build a relationship of fairness, reciprocity, and mutual benefit with Tanzania. I think if Tanzania does the kinds of reforms that it needs to spur double-digit growth, then that trade imbalance is going to start taking care of itself.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the 10% trade tariff is incumbent, or is contingent rather, to the Tanzanian government having reforms of trade relations and ensuring that U.S. investors who come here in Tanzania do not face non-tax related barriers for us to spur the growth. Are these two in any way connected? Is there any correlation?
Absolutely connected. And it's connected again in this desire on the part of the United States of America with partners like Tanzania to reset our trade and economic relationship on these principles of fairness, reciprocity, and mutual benefit. And as I said to some of your previous questions, and you just correctly, I think, summarized it, for too long, American companies and investors who have tried to enter the Tanzanian market have seen their investments and their projects stymied and delayed. And they face these obstacles that are these predatory taxation policies or non-tariff regulatory barriers that sometimes deals. I mean, let's talk about the LNG deal. I mean, the LNG deal has been a priority of multiple governments over 13 years, or a stated priority. And yet that has not been finalized. And one of the biggest American companies in the world, ExxonMobil, is a part of this, is a part of the consortium that's trying to close the deal. So right now, I can say, we are making amazing progress. The president spoke about it in her Sherry party speech. I think there is a commitment on the part of the government to finish this deal now. If the government were to close that deal, a $42 billion deal that's half of Tanzania's GDP right now, I think that would send an incredible signal to international investors everywhere. It would send a message to American companies who are looking to enter the market here that big deals can get done in Tanzania, that big companies with big interests, with global interests, are looking to Tanzania to do business.
Yeah.
And then I think if we can lower some of those other barriers to trade, you're going to see an inflow of economic activity that raises growth. And then you can start seeing this equality, this kind of trade relationship, economic relationship that we both want.
Indeed. So, Ambassador, just for clarity's sake, your framing of how or the hurdles that U.S. companies are facing here in Tanzania makes it seem as if some of the companies are targeted. Is that the case? Because you said relative to other companies that are operating in the country, they seem to flourish compared to American companies. So, do you have the sense
No,
that they're being targeted?
thank you for asking that. I'm not going to try and make an argument that American companies are targeted. I want to, I think the important thing is, and I hear it from companies in many different countries
Okay.
Across the board, that oftentimes it is just too difficult to do business here. They want to do business here. They see the possible return, but they are saying that if we could do some of these targeted reforms, it would be a lot easier, and the growth potential and the return would be much better. So I don't want to make the argument that American companies are targeted. They certainly are facing obstacles.
Yeah.
And the big goal, my priority and my goal is, as we said at the very beginning of our conversation today, we want to reset this relationship. We want to build a new foundation that is stronger than what we had before. And we want to see that we always talk about opportunity. We talk about how good things can be. Well, I want to start seizing that. I don't want to just talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
I want to seize it. And so I think that's where we are right now. I have faith, I have confidence and optimism based on the engagements I've had over the past months that we can get there. It's just going to take work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Work together.
Indeed. And now we've talked a lot about resetting, rebuilding, and further to that, let's talk about the travel restrictions that Tanzanians face currently, because at the beginning of January 1st, business people, tourists, and even scholars now have limited access, visa access to go to the U.S. Again, the concerns that were raised by the U.S. government are valid. Of course, the visa overstays and the breaking of some of the rules that are supposed to, be considered when one travels to the U.S. is a valid concern. However, when you put almost like a blanket restriction impacting tourists, impacting students, again, it further widens the gap when it comes to positive relations between our two governments. So I want you to address the travel restrictions at the moment, and what has been the feedback that you've been getting from Tanzanians?
Great. And thank you for the way that you initially framed the question and the acknowledgement of the very real concerns that are driving a lot of American policy here. And just for the audience, I want to just reiterate that, over the years, many people have left their home countries, Tanzania included, but throughout the world, to the United States for legitimate purposes, to study, to travel, to work, to visit our tourist attractions, to see sporting events, everything. But there were huge instances of where those people then overstayed their visa and decided that they wanted to create a new life in the United States. But unfortunately, they were creating that new life illegally. In parallel, we had the United States was receiving many, many people, and in many cases, legitimately, who were escaping violence, who were escaping conflict, and looking to try and get a better life in the United States. But also an overwhelming number of people who were economic migrants, who were leaving their countries and said, you know what, it's not working for me here. I want to see if I can do better and get richer in the United States of America. But again, a lot of those people were coming illegally, and they were over flooding our system. So suddenly our immigration system was getting just overburdened.
Yeah.
Our social services in the United States were getting burdened as we were paying for more people who were there illegally. So we had a real problem that we needed to address. And as there are some figures out there publicly that unfortunately some Tanzanians were overstaying their visa. And staying in the United States. It was something we had to address. So over the past couple of months, again, we've been engaging with your government and trying to talk about how can we address the vulnerabilities in the immigration system that led to some of these restrictions and see if we can overcome them. I really do believe, and you asked about the feedback, of course, from businesses, from average, Tanzanians who are studying, who would love to come and continue their studies in the United States.
Yeah.
The biggest question they ask me is, when can we get there? We'd love to get there. We'd love to experience the United States of America and see if we can advance our lives. And I tell them, I would love to get there. I want to get there as soon as we can. And I think my government would love to get there as soon as we can. But we can't do it at the expense of American national economic security. So as long as we can finally balance those two things, I think we'll be okay. And it's just an ongoing conversation we're having with your government.
So you've talked about having an ongoing conversation with the Tanzanian government to address this particular negative development for many Tanzanians. But my question would also be, before we visit social media or these websites and then we see an updated list and Tanzania is among the countries, what's sort of consultation is done on the background with the Tanzanian government to address this situation before it is made public? Because for most of us, we are caught off guard. I remember that particular day, someone called me who has a daughter who studies in the US. So her concern was that what will happen to academic endeavors if now this is going to happen in 2026. So my question is, were there consultations with the Tanzanian government to address this, what was happening with the visa overstays and all these other regulatory concerns before a decision was made to include it among the countries that were restricted?
Yeah, I agree with you. News happens very fast, and I know it can take people by surprise. We have been, as I said, engaging the government in consultations for months, and even since the start of the Trump administration. The president made it very clear from day one that immigration was going to be a top priority, and that we were going to be looking at the country level of how do we address this and how do we protect the homeland and our borders and our citizens. So that was very clear. We have, over the course of those months, shared concerns, shared some information and data with the government to look for ways that we could address it. So it's an ongoing conversation, and even this restriction is under continuous review. So there is a review process in place, and we will just continue to engage the government and see if we can, again, address those vulnerabilities that led to those restrictions.
Okay. Now let's talk about the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which lapsed, but good enough, the U.S. House of Representatives, they passed the bill to renew it up to 2028. Now the bill still needs to be reviewed and approved by the Senate. What is your optimism that this is going to happen sooner rather than later? Because it was well received by African governments. The African Union praised this positive outcome, but they're calling for accelerated approval by the Senate. So what is the optimism there?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, the fact that the House took it up and that the Senate's going to review it should be seen by African governments, by Tanzania's government as well, as a positive indicator of how the United States of America wants to establish a fair, reciprocal, and mutually beneficial trade relationship with Africa and with African countries. So I think that is a positive step. The goal, and I think the level of optimism, we'll see how the debate goes, but ultimately the debate's going to be centered around how does this program help us get to what we were discussing before? Does this program help us get to a place where we have a free, mutually beneficial, reciprocal trade relationship with our partners like Tanzania? So if AGOA can fit in with that, and we can offer tariff-free access to U.S. markets and see that Tanzania is taking seriously our companies and our investors' concerns about market access here, then I think I'm fairly confident that we can get someplace that the future can look a lot brighter. But I want to also I think it's important now, as AGOA is being debated, and even though its future may be uncertain at this point, it's got to get to the Senate, it's got to get to the president's desk for signature. But Tanzania should start looking now at, if AGOA were in place, how do we make better use of it? Because when AGOA was offering tariff-free access to the United States, it was underutilized.
It was underutilized.
And Tanzania was not taking advantage of that opportunity. So I think, again, it should start looking now
But, there were concerns about the rules of origin, the diversification
Well, of course.
of some of the goods.
And I think that makes sense. And I think you and your viewers and readers would understand. AGOA is not meant for a third country to all of a sudden try and route its trade goods through Tanzania for a minimal, marginal, improvement or addition that somehow makes it Tanzania and then gets into the American market.
Despite the fact that most of the raw materials are not locally sourced here.
So I think these are the things, though, Mpoki, that the government should be looking at and saying, okay, given all of these things, given the idea that this is not meant to be a backdoor into the U.S. market for other countries, how does Tanzania start taking the steps now to make better use of, to attract the investment that can start doing the value addition and the beneficiation here inside Tanzania, that can start maybe, opening up some of the regional trade markets so the goods can come here and start making Tanzania the kind of manufacturing hub that can take advantage of a thing like AGOA. I think that's the kind of discussion that I hope Tanzania has, so that if this opportunity comes, we don't waste another, life cycle of AGOA questioning about, well, why are Tanzania's exports to the United States so low?
Okay, so now let's talk about the military drills or military cooperation between the U.S. and Tanzania. We have been seeing a lot of engagement with Tanzania's People's Defense Forces, that's the TPDF. How far does this security cooperation go? At the moment, there is a lot of concern about sovereignty. We are seeing the actions that the U.S. is taking in different parts of the world, which is understandable for security reasons. So when we see your military cooperating with the Tanzanian military, questions might arise. What are the negotiations that are happening on the backdrop with regards to sovereignty, a mutually respectful relation? Can you address that particular concern about the military security relations between our two countries?
Sure. First of all, I want to just encourage everybody to read our national security strategy, which is publicly available online. It talks a lot about respect for sovereignty in that document, and it's really a driving principle of U.S. foreign policy and the way that we're approaching things. Now, of course, President Trump is going to act, and the United States government will act if there is a real threat to national security of the United States. But sovereignty is a key thing. We want to be able to engage Tanzania as equals, as sovereign nations that are looking at developing on shared interests, a shared understanding of the problems, and then shared solutions to those problems. So that's one thing on the sovereignty question. In terms of our security relationship, as you saw, I went up to Dodoma. I just met the new Secretary of Defense. The Minister of Defense. I was thinking of our own system. Minister of Defense. We have a robust engagement with the Tanzania People Defense Forces over the years. I feel that we have a shared understanding of the security challenges and dilemmas in Tanzania and East Africa, and a shared commitment to trying to address them together. And those are terrorism. You look Tanzania. You look at a map, and really, Tanzania is surrounded.
We are surrounded
by terrorist threats.
Yeah. And
so I think there's a real understanding that's something that we need to work on together and share our expertise, our military to military expertise, to try and address it. There is regional conflict, Eastern DRC. The United States, of course, is playing a leading role in trying to find a solution to 30 years of conflict and war there. But that is causing, migration flows unsustainable into and through Burundi into Tanzania. It has an effect on the regions and Tanzania's economic potential. Its ability to be Tanzania to be a real gateway to the continent. So I think there's an understanding we need to work together to solve those kinds of problems. And then there's the security of the Indian Ocean, to protect it from piracy, from drug flows, from illegal fishing. So I think there's a shared understanding that those are the prime areas for cooperation. Now, in terms of mutual benefit, last year I went up to see the closing day of joint military exercises under Justified Accord 2025. And I saw elements of the U.S. military working side by side with elements of the TPDF. And the thing that I loved about that exercise was that TPDF was sharing its expertise with the United States military about how do you work and operate in this kind of military theater? What does that look like? And our military was learning from the Tanzanian military forces. And at the same time, the Tanzanian military forces were learning from us and getting new capacity and new skills to be able to keep themselves safe as peacekeepers in the Eastern DRC, to be able to keep the Indian Ocean safe, to be able to address those things we were talking about. So the history of our relationship has been a history of mutual learning, of mutual respect, of mutual capacity building. And we've got another joint exercise coming up in March.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see that again and to see that that respectful relationship continue to grow.
Okay, well, we're still on security. Maybe there's something that you might be willing to address. We saw there were, it was publicized that a U.S. national who crossed the border and he was armed. That was according to the Tanzanian government. What do you have to say about that?
I thought it was quite unfortunate. I'll be quite honest. I thought it was very unfortunate the way that all of that story was blown up in the press and some of the comments that were made from government officials. There are privacy concerns about U.S. citizens, and those just need to be respected. So I want to start with that right up front. But that was a story that really shouldn't have been a story.
Okay, was it legitimate?
I mean, there was a U.S. citizen that came across the border, but it was a non-story, and so that was something that we talked very seriously with your government about. That as we go forward, and for the safety of American citizens, the safety to ensure that the 140,000 American tourists that come here every year, that we can be sure about their privacy interests, their access, that we're able to access them when they're in prison, that their privacy is not concerns or not disrespected in public. Those are things that we
So those were misplaced concerns, and he wasn't armed.
The misplaced. The thing that I'm trying to tell you is blowing an issue up in public was not appropriate.
Okay. Ambassador Lentz, that's all the time that we have today, unfortunately. Thank you for being part of today's episode of the Citizen Exclusive.
Thank you so much, Mpoki. This was a really fun conversation, and I wish we had more time.
Indeed.
Okay.
You were with me, Mpoki Thompson. We were with the acting ambassador of the U.S. to Tanzania, Andrew Lentz. That's a wrap for today's episode. Until next time, adios.